All right. Well, good afternoon or evening to you all. For those of you, depending on where you are, I want to welcome you to actually the first Montessori Colloquium for Sarasota University of the academic year. So we took a break during the summer. And so just real quickly, to share what that is. So it's the idea behind the Montessori Colloquia are that we have different guest speakers from that obviously related to Montessori to come talk to our Montessori community. These are open to the public, obviously probably more relevant to people that are involved in Montessori, but really they're open to anybody involved in Montessori who wants to hear the topic. So even if you're not a student at Sarasota University, or if you're not a student from CGMS, if you wanted to share with your communities, we welcome all. And again, this is just meant to be a service provided by Sarasota University and our guests, of course, to help promote Montessori and be an opportunity to learn more about different components that may not be necessarily, about Montessori, but related and certainly in support of Montessori. So welcome to you all. And I mentioned this earlier, and we've been talking for a bit about how wonderful it is to get people, especially on a Wednesday night. We know that you all are busy. We know that you're in the midst of school years and most of you are teaching. So thank you so much for coming. I want to talk a couple of things about just sort of not ground rules really, but some housekeeping. If you have questions, we're going to have some time at the end, but if you have a comment that you want to write about in the chat room, I will do my best to facilitate, and as Jody has time, ask those questions. So please feel free to reach out that way. And again, there will be opportunity for questions at the end. And then also, I wanted to ask if you have not already muted yourself. I think for most of us, Zooming is, we're pretty used to it at this point. But if you're on, please mute your microphone so that way we don't get feedback or pick up anything. And of course, if you do, not the end of the world as well. So with that, I want to introduce this week's guest, my very good friend, Ms. Jody Malterre. A little bit of background on Jody, and if those of you who've been joining us a couple minutes early will notice that we have a very fun relationship. Miss Jody and I both did our Montessori training, or elementary training rather, together. And this was probably, I don't want to know how many years ago. And so we did that at St. Catherine's University with Dr. Michael Dorr. And so had a wonderful time there and have had a great relationship since. Jody, before she came there, also had her early childhood training, ran and operated 2 Montessori schools. And I'll let Jody talk a bit more about this, but more recently, in the last couple of years, Jody, I don't know how many, has gotten more involved with positive discipline. And so what I think Jody has done, and she's actually done professional development for me at various schools, is talking about professional development positive discipline and how positive discipline can impact your practice, or at the very least, be compatible with Montessori. And so when I asked Jody to join us today, I basically said, please just share what you're doing, share what you think is relevant for practitioners or people with Montessori. And so with that, I'm going to welcome Jody, thank her again for doing this with us today. And again, as I told you, I've seen her speak. She runs courses with the Montessori Foundation, a couple other things I think she's going to talk about. So please listen, reach out to her. She's a wealth of information and has done great things for Montessori and for many, many parents and schools. So with that, Jody, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robin. You're supposed to set the bar low. It just makes my life a little easier. Yeah, so really enjoying my life kind of post school owner, administrator, and teacher, because I was wearing 3 full-time hats simultaneously and raising some children. So now I'm like in this new phase of adult children. I don't own these schools, but I still live sort of in 2 lanes of Montessori and positive discipline. And a big sort of impetus behind getting really involved in positive discipline is this book. So I don't know if you have anybody ever read Positive Discipline? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. It's often included in training centers, and it's so compatible with Montessori that it's rare to find people that haven't heard of it or kind of had a touch point with it in some way. So this was a new iteration of the book that came out a year ago, and it's excellent. And so I've been doing positive discipline mostly with Montessori schools. And then when the book came out, it's like, even more work came my way because the book kind of speaks our language. So I'm going to give you well, I'm a Montessori teacher, so I got to tell you a story, right? Because that's what we do. But this story will be quite short, but the story is Alfred Adler, who is kind of the founder of this positive discipline theory. He didn't know that he became the founder, but Adler was a Jew living in Europe in 2 world wars. So he saw the same things that this important lady saw. And they, both kind of had in common living in the landscape of the world, both born 1870, like exactly the same age. And both were marginalized for various reasons. Adler as a Jew, Dr. Montessori as a female and a female mother without a declared father, right? So there were contentious things going on for both of them. They did meet briefly, but they really were saying the same thing. And that was Adler was not wanting to say the same things that the Freudians of the time were wanting to say, which is like, it's all about like drives and tendencies and envies. And they wanted to keep like psychology so academic and kind of sacred and secretive. They were very elusive. They wanted to get people on the couch and hypnosis and then blame it on, penis envy or something, or hysteria. And Adler came along and said, I don't think it's that. I think people are looking for social equality. I think people want to have a sense of belonging and a sense of significance, significance in a way that they feel like they have value and they're needed. They want to contribute because they're needed. And that just did not resonate well for the Freudians and some of the other academias of the time, but it sure resonated with a lot of the principles that Dr. Montessori was saying about children. Adler was saying more about this in general about humans. Dr. Montessori came on and was kind of quite the champion for children, right? But they really were saying the same things. So Adler migrates to the US, and his kind of protege that kind of picked up the torch with all of the theory was Rudolf Dreikurs. And I don't know if you remember, but growing up, I always heard like, well, you have children and they don't come with the training manual or they don't come with some kind of manual. Well, they kind of do. And Dreikurs wrote it. He took all of Adlerian's ideas and turned it into a book called Children the Challenge. And I hate the title now because I don't want to see children as a challenge. I want to see children as, they're having a challenge. How can I help? And when I show up that way, I show up a lot differently than this child is a challenge, But back in the 50s and 60s, when you wrote the book, Children the Challenge became a revolutionary book for people to understand how they might raise their children. Did anybody read Children the Challenge by chance? Kathy, I saw you nodding. Okay, there's a handful of you. It's an excellent book. It's just that you have to read it like everything else that we're going through. You have to read it through the filter of the time that it was written. Right? Because there are things in there that maybe might not be as relevant. There's some assumptions made about women were in the home, maybe they weren't working. So lots of references to kind of gender stereotypical behavior. But if you can like look past that, the content is so rich, right? So then along comes Jane Nelson, who takes Children the Challenge and writes it in the 80s, a little bit updated, brought in a whole new bunch of new examples. And then she brings in Lynn Lott, who was an expert in experiential learning. Hello, that's our kind of wheelhouse, right? And it was for adults. In other words, parenting classes that people were doing with Dreikurs' book were lecture style, maybe a little discussion, but it was a lot of telling and then discussing. And Lynn Lott and Jane came along and said, we need to experience it. We need to have role plays and drawing forth more from people. We're not going to stuff in, we're going to draw forth. And so you can see why this model of positive discipline resonates so well with people, because it's how we learn. Children are not the only ones that learn sensorially, right? So that just gives you a little background as to kind of what I do and why I speak to so many Montessori people. And so when I'm not working directly with a school, I teach classes online for how to train people how to be positive discipline instructors. And I work with a lot of Montessori people that want to have positive discipline classes in their schools. And that was a model we leaned heavily on. We actually had 3 schools in Idaho, and year round we had parenting classes going. As one was ending, a new one was starting. And we had them in the morning, we had them at lunch, we had them in the evening, we experienced on the weekends, classes for dads, classes for moms, classes for anybody, and it was just a culture that we built in. And we saw just a dramatic shift in our student population and our parent population, both the community it built, and we got bold enough to even start requiring it. So if you were going to enroll in our school, you had to take a kind of a revised, kind of a shorter version of a positive discipline course. So that's something I feel really strongly about helping people kind of launch. So I do train people how to teach positive discipline classes, as well as working with schools. So that's like a little thing about me and what I do. I just got back 2 days ago. I spent some time in the East Coast. I'm in Idaho, but I was in the East Coast working with a school up in the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York, and then the school in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. So I kind of find myself kind of all over, and I love working with schools. I love working with parents. I love working with teachers. So I want to tell you a little bit more though about, that was kind of my little story about them and a story about me, kind of where I fit into that timeline. But I do want to share a few slides here that kind of give you a sense of, and I'm going to hit play here. It's never a clean way to do this. There we go. Because the title tonight was like, what are you going to do when these classroom leadership, management, whatever you call it, tools aren't working? And I noticed there are a lot of you that mentioned you were toddlers, or not that you weren't toddlers, excuse me, that you work with toddlers, although you probably feel like a toddler sometimes, right? I know I do. It's frustrating to have this phenomenal environment and have it not be enough, or have this phenomenal, pedagogy and delivery, and then it's still not enough. And I don't know if you can relate to this idea that sometimes these leadership tools, I'm going to stop my share for a minute. I went too soon because I want to see, do some of you feel this way sometimes? Like, I get these strategies, but they're not working. And anybody feeling like they even were working a couple years ago, and like, what happened, right? They're really not working. Yeah. And it's frustrating because it seems as though what we have to deliver to these children or to these families, or if you're administrators, even just the environment we're creating, the prepared environment for the staff member, it seems like it should be enough. And why are people still so demanding? And that's kind of what I want to lean in tonight. And I see there's a variety of reasons that brought you here and a variety of ages. So I'll try to address a few of those as we move along. So what I'll share is that back on Freud, a lot of those folks, and then we had Freud, and then we had Pavlov, the Pavlovian response, a lot of, in psychology, what was going on is behavior modification, right? A lot of parenting is like that: bribes, rewards, sticker charts, training children, to get them to do things. And Dr. Montessori didn't subscribe to this idea of we're trying to modify their behavior, that we're trying to be behavior modifiers. She said, oh no, we're constructivists. We're here to supplement the natural process of a child constructing, right? And so that's really a big piece of the work that I do when I work with especially when my love of working with Montessori's, because it's such an easier lift for all of us than I'm working with, traditional mindsets, because we already kind of approach the child with such reverence and such respect. But the reality is that we are not here to modify them. We're here to kind of help speak their belief behind behavior. And the best way I can share that is really in an Adlerian metaphor, which comes up quite a bit when I'm doing any classes with Adler. And that's this iceberg model. Here's the iceberg, and That's the part we don't see, right? And the part that we do see above the water, we'll call that behavior. And if we don't like what we see, we tend to want to kind of chip away at it, get it to stop. I don't know if it is like this for you, but generally across the board, it's like we're trying to get it to stop. It might stop, but it comes back. Stops, comes back. Or maybe it stops, but then it comes back and escalates, and then it just keeps escalating. So the reality is, if we only are looking at above the surface, only looking at these children as just doers of behavior, we're missing this whole piece below, which is, wait a minute, it's the belief that matters. Because if I just chip away, just more ice comes up, right? It feels like whack-a-mole. Like you're going to just whack those moles until, that game never stops, until I guess your quarter runs out. It's probably more than a quarter now. I'm aging myself with that kind of comment. Anybody know the game whack-a-mole? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like children's arcades, most frustrating game on the planet, if you ask me. So where is this belief coming from? Because that's the reality, is if we're going to be classroom leaders, then, and think about our classroom management. And I'm kind of using the word leaders very intentionally because I don't want to manage people. I want to lead people. So I think of it as classroom leadership, not classroom management. But here's what we're up against, is that people, not just children. So this is employees and our partners or spouses, significant others, our grown children, our young children, the colleague that we work alongside, a teaching assistant, whoever we're around, we're all collecting data, meaning we're observing what's going around. Now, with young children, obviously, they're absorbing more of that. But all of us make interpretations by what we're seeing. Now, you and I, we're adults, so we have a prefrontal cortex. So I hope our interpretation might be a little bit more accurate, just because we can bring perspective and life wisdom. Children don't have that yet, though. And so they can form beliefs very easily that might not actually be accurate or helpful, but they are their beliefs. And if we sat in their shoes, we'd probably believe the same thing. Okay. Now the beliefs then would be what's behind the behavior that occurs, how they act. Now, their behavior might be totally unconscious or subconscious. Like they're not having a belief system and going, okay, that means I have to do this. And they do that consciously. A good example of that is like children are looking for connection, but they'll settle for attention. And they're not settling consciously. They're just want that connection so much that, they'll settle for it. They'll just settle for attention, even if the attention isn't super positive. Now, again, they're not choosing that. That's just sort of a natural result of how strong our need is for connection, right? So once any of us do something, that brings new data because people respond and they react. And so children are going through this cycle throughout the day, and their belief system, which is below the surface of the water, right? That's the bigger piece, might be really inaccurate. But the problem is that all of us in our, what we call here, our private logic, we tend to have this internal bias system that we only collect the data that supports our belief system. Because that we don't want to have this cognitive dissonance of like, I believe this, but I see this. We need to see what we believe and have it fit to our belief. So if a child, for example, in your classroom thinks that you're picking on them too much, that there's some kind of injustice, that they get in trouble or they get blamed or they get caught or called out more often, well, they're not going to notice all the times that that's not happening. They're going to notice all the times when, even if you give them this nice little reminder of something and they're like, see, my friend was just doing that this morning and you didn't call them out, and that just builds this belief, right? For some of these young toddlers, their belief system might be around this idea of entitlement, that they need to have things done for them, that they're going to find their belonging and get their connection and attention if you're doing for them, because maybe that's what's happening at home. So all of us are going through this cycle. And until we kind of get cozy and own this, that not own it ourselves, but kind of own that this is happening, no amount of classroom leadership or positive discipline strategies really are going to work all that well, because we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole, right? So all of our behavior, leadership, management, whatever you call it, have got to exist from this starting point, not above. And sometimes when we are trying to redirect children their behavior, if we're just trying to stop the behavior, that's why that tool that you're using might not be useful, because we're not addressing the belief down here. And the belief is either I feel like I belong and I matter, or I'm significant and I'm valued, or I don't. And when children have that sense of belonging and through connection and significance, through value and validation and feeling a sense of being needed, when they feel that way, their behavior is very representative of that. It reflects some cooperation, and sure, I can do that, and I'm willing to kind of go along with things. I'm not perfect, but for the most part, I'm pretty, cooperative person to be around. So when you're seeing misbehavior, what if we didn't call it misbehavior and we saw it as a deficit of a feeling of connection and a feeling of value and a feeling of like what my impact is on the group? Right. So rather than seen as misbehavior, it's more like a mistaken attempt to get their needs met. And we all have the same needs, to feel that sense of belonging and significance. So the private logic kind of sits here in this idea of like, okay, all of us are kind of going through life of I am, the world is, therefore, this is what I got to do. Right. All unconscious. We're all doing this. If we broke that down a little bit, thinking about children or students, I am, adults are, it might be caregivers are, or parents are, or teachers are, and they kind of need that to align. It's a little hard for them to be like, well, teacher or guide does this, but parent does this. So if you are very different from if you're female, for example, and you're very different from their mother, if they have a mother figure in the home, then that creates kind of a cognitive dissonance, and they'll probably push back initially more on you than on mom. Same thing for a parent in the home that is male and a male teacher. So there's just a need to find like adults are, women are, men are, they're just trying to like kind of figure all this out. People are. So in the midst of that, they're also trying to navigate mistakes are, and I'm loved when, or I feel encouraged to be my best self when, and therefore I must. All of this is, look at where it is. It's all under the surface. They're not choosing this. But when we're trying to kind of unpack the riddle of a child, or you're like, I just can't reach this kid, or I just feel like nothing works, go here, put on your little scuba dive, go under the, your mask and snorkel or tank if you have to go a little deeper. And let's start looking underneath and start taking just a hypothesis of, if I were this child, how would they be seeing life? What's their private logic? Oh, I can see why you do what you do. That's kind of where we want to get to, this place of the behavior that we see is actually a solution to the child's problem that you don't see. It's a creative attempt to get their belonging and significance met, right? So they're actually trying to solve a problem of, I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I'm valued. So I got to be the boss in the class. I got to push back, right? So this is there's 4 kind of common mistaken beliefs. We call them the mistaken goals, but I'll just share 2 just briefly. One of them is this child, and it's like they're wearing this silly, I have my hair up, so that makes it hard to put my hat on, but that's all right. I'll have to wear it like a graduation cap. It's like they're just wearing a silly hat, and it's like they're just holding this poster, and I'll spotlight myself so you can see all this of, they have this mistaken attempt of like, what? They're not finding the belonging and significance in a helpful way up here. And the belief is coming from this condition, this only if thinking. I belong only if, right? You're paying attention to me, notice me. And I'm sure we have people in our classes that are kind of wearing these hats, you know? And let me tell you something, they don't want to be. What they want is the connection, but they're lacking that. And this is the hat that they wear to get it, to make sure they can feel belonging and significance. And sadly, it's in a less useful way. And let's face it, they get a lot of payouts. People laugh, people want to be around them, or they get a reaction from us, right? So one of the things we cover in our classes is like, this child is underemployed. That's what I say. Kids that are misbehaving are underemployed. You know, this kid is like, utilize me, you know, help me be useful. Let me take this spotlight away. Like, notice me, involve me. I want to be useful because that's my connection to the community, right? So that's one belief. And anybody have one of those in your class? Yeah, or not one of those. You got plenty of those in your class. Yeah. So yeah, getting to know their strengths. One of the things that when I say like misbehaving children are kind of underemployed, like a lot of our country, right? They've lost a feeling of purpose, or they've lost a sense of social impact. Like, do they know what their social impact is in the class? And the other thing, and this comment about like utilizing their strengths, yeah, being a teacher is like being a talent scout, you know, raw talent, you know, finding that person that, you know, you just kind of almost have to mine it out of them, you know, rather than seeing as believing. You believe it, so then you'll go see it. Yeah. So the other hat that children wear, I know you have some of these too, and maybe you wear it too, by the way, it turns out, or maybe you wore it as a child. It's this hat. This is I'm going to use some power tools hat. So, you know, if I had my electric drill out here, I'd be like, zzz, zzz, let's go, right? I am ready to show you how much power I have. And this is a child who down here, we're seeing defiance and refusals and maybe aggression, all the power stuff, right? And this is the stuff that escalates a lot. So this hat, the behavior like goes away and comes back, and it goes away and it comes back, and super annoying, and you deal with this like all day long, right? This one just grows and grows and grows and grows and like escalates quickly. And it's because the belief behind this behavior is, you know what? I belong only. And what a terrible place to be is if you're in a condition that your belonging is dependent only when I'm the boss. You can't boss me, right? And that's kind of an icky condition that a child might have a sense of. And so can you already start to see why some of these tools that we use don't work? Because we're bumping up against someone's like, you can't make me. And so bigger and louder and harsher and cornering them only like creates the tug of war, right?
Yeah.
And if their hat is this hat, getting in trouble actually is a payout of attention. So it perpetuates. So we cover in our classes, we cover these extensively, and we cover 4 goals, but you can see why tools kind of bump up against this. Let me pause there. And are there questions or comments you want to make? Feel free to put them in the chat or just call out.
And for those of you who are not there, I will try to moderate, but you know, it's a small enough group that if you, and Jody, I think you probably have it on gallery mode. So if you want to just raise your hand and ask a question or share a comment, please feel free.
Yeah. Kaori, is that how we say it?
Yes, Kaori, thank you. So far, I'm enjoying. I love your visual. It just sticks in my mind. So thank you so much. I've been learning about special needs. That's my focus and my interests. And it just occurred to me. So I get that this behavior sometimes or oftentimes calling out for attention. How would you consider those children who genuinely those behaviors are stemming from their sensory needs. I mean, and how would you differentiate them, or would you consider them all together as in the realm of positive discipline?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that briefly, and then I want to show a few tools, and then we'll circle back and say, hey, what do you think? Right. I will say that one of the great things about positive discipline is once the original book was written, Positive Discipline, out came Positive Discipline in the Classroom, Positive Discipline for Children with Special Needs, Positive Discipline for 0 to 3, Positive Discipline for preschoolers, Positive Discipline for teenagers. And there's quite a few more actually. And now we've got Montessori. So what I find is the tools generally work for children with special needs, but we have to use the tool that is the child's developmental stage. So some tools, I'm going to show you a couple tools tonight that take more words and some that take less words. So let's say a child that's 10, they can handle more words. But if it's a child that's 10 with special needs, less words, okay, then let's use the tools that I might have used for 3 to 6-year-olds, right? So, and then anything that we can do visual. Yeah, so we'll come back to that. And I do want to have some time, and we're just up on the hour. Is that right? We go for top of the hour. Is that right, Robin?
We basically say an hour. I mean, generally speaking, it goes a little bit longer, and it depends too on. So don't feel compelled to, Jody. I don't want to. I don't want to take up any more of your time, and I really appreciate it. So you just get what you can, but we're recording this, so if you have to leave, we can send it out. So
okay,
just do what you got to do to make sure you get what you think is important for people.
All right, I'm going to do what I got to do. And you don't mind if I go till, let's see, it's 5:30 for me, 7:30 for some. We might go till like 10:30, 11. Everybody okay with that?
10:30, 11 your time, so like 6.5 hours?
I'm kidding.
Yeah, 4.5.
This is my problem, and maybe you feel the same way, is that, when we get an opportunity, someone says, oh, tell me about Montessori and capture in an hour. You're like, no, that's almost like, give me 30 seconds. I'll do my 30-second elevator, or give me at least 3 hours, and this is like an hour is almost painful for me. And I just happen to love to talk too. So I'll keep rolling, and I want to share some tools.
We do have a question. I think just so you're aware of it. What about the children who have a very strong will? So keep that in the back of your head while you keep on going. But yeah, I'd say just keep on rolling.
And what about those adults with a really strong will too? That maybe I'm a good teacher only if, like, where's our only ifs? Only if my class is quiet. Only if if everybody's focused and doing work. Only if everybody is complying, or is it only if my environment is beautiful? So there's certainly plenty of only ifs we're putting on ourselves. And let's own this. We love wearing this hat, like wearing power hats. Like, we make that very sexy for children, right? Because let's face it, we've got kids that are being told what to do by adults, parents, guides, teachers, through the day, about 400 times a day. They're being told what to do. So children are living kind of in this world with this visual right here. It's like they're living in ladders, adult, child, right? And they're just being told what to do 400 times. Now, I don't know how you feel about being told what to do 400 times, especially if it is prefaced with, you need to. I don't like that. I don't take that feedback well. And as guides, we love to tell children what to do, right? Even if we say it with a soft landing, right? So we already have kind of given a child their position by us wearing our power hat up here. And let me just give you a history lesson. This is life. This is what we've been doing since the dawn of time. This is part of the human story. Sadly, it is like, light skin, dark skin, kings and peasants, and adults and children, and men and women, and the haves and the have-nots. We've lived in a world with a lot of ladders, right? And so we're really, as society, sadly, we're really good at this. We're good at modeling this. And we're really trying to kind of, turn things a bit, right? Like to move the needle. And we're trying to get here in a place of mutual respect, dignity, access to dignity, belonging and significance. This is not a position of equal authority or equal responsibility or equal accountability. We all know that as the adult in the room, or if you're the administrator in a building, you might carry more responsibility or accountability. That's not what this is for. This is about like how we're going to do life together, right? And children might not be getting this at home. In fact, at home, they might have gone from here to whoop, and now they're wearing this hat a lot and it works, or they're wearing this hat. Like, oh, I've been elevated on a pedestal my whole life. You mean you're not going to do it for me? You're not going to open my lunchbox for me? But I can't do it. I don't want to do it, So there's been a lot of kind of entitlement, and that's happening. And when you're at home for, a couple of years, a lot more. That probably happened a lot in the name of survival for a lot of families, right? So what we're wanting to do, and this is what my experience is, that positive discipline tools are designed to be here. Okay. However, it's very easy to use the tool, but still use it from up here. And so when I work with schools, we work on the tool. Like, first, let's learn the tool. I tell you the tool. It's like our first period lesson. Got to do the tool. Or got to know what it is. This is, right? And then we go to our second period lesson and we do some role plays. We got to practice the tool. That's kind of our second period. Third period is go back to your classroom and then figure out how to actually implement the tool, but implement it from here, not from here. Because we're kind of subtly reinforcing our position of power with children when we're saying things like, no, you can't, that's not acceptable. That's not respectful. Stop, and maybe we're pretty good at Montessorians to maybe not use all of that language, but they're getting a lot of it at home too. Right. So they're kind of assuming adults are here and they're here, but they don't want to be there. They want to climb on up. And so they're kind of, let's face it, in the classroom, they're kind of ranking themselves like, well, I'm not as good as her, but I'm better than him, and there's just a natural process. And like, the reality is, who's saying who's at the top and who's saying when you're good enough? So using the positive discipline tools from this position, which is a position of a lot of empathy. That's why I did that whole belief system. Like, I keep saying like so much. I don't know why. I just spent the weekend with my young adult children. They say it all the time. I think I've absorbed it. Anyway, using the position, or using our knowledge of private logic first, and then connection before correction from this position will make your tool 10 times more powerful. It's not about the tool, it's about the relationship. And it's frustrating because people kind of want I don't have my magic wand. It's just out of reach, but I have a magic wand right over there. I love to wave my wand because people want to say, well, what do I do about this? And what about this kid? And what about the strong-willed child, or a child with special needs? Or what about transitions? All these things that I'm seeing in the chat. I wish I could wave my magic wand and say, this is what you do. And it's less about what you do and it's more about how you show up. Does that make sense? Am I frustrating you yet? Because I find that very frustrating for people to show up and go, but I want the tools. Okay. But I'm like, but we got to figure out how to be. Yeah. Comments, questions.
Real quick, just I'm trying to mute for those of you, there are a couple that aren't muted, just if you wouldn't mind just muting, and somehow it's not allowing me to mute you, which I would do because I'm sure you don't realize you're not muted, but so if you could, that'd be great. Or I can try muting all, and then Jody, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay, so we're all muted, but that's not, there's still an open invitation to go ahead and have a discussion.
Somehow this isn't working for me. So at any rate.
All right. So here's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. First of all, ladder. I really want you to take that image. Second image I really want you to take is this one here. And this is an image just from Dr. Bruce Perry. He talked about the 3 R's, is that the 3 R's are following the way the brain works. And that is, in order to be in a regulated state and be able to make, sound choices and actions that are helpful, is this image here. We must follow that the brain has to be in a regulated state, then have a feeling that there is a relationship that Dr. Dan Siegel calls this feeling felt. Does the child feel like you have their back? Do they feel like you're out to get them? Once we are regulated, there's a feeling of connection, then we're in a position with a child to reason, to make choices, to decide what we're going to do now, to problem solve. And it's often in the name of expediency and frustration or lack of time, patience, whatever. We jump to reason and the child's not regulated, or they don't feel like that relationship is that ladder tipped on its side. And so that's tip number 1. Are we trying to move them through this process too quickly, that we don't actually have access to their cortex because they're still in their limbic system, limbic area of their brain, which is where their amygdala is, which is their feeling part of their brain. So you got the brainstem, which is the reacting part. You got the amygdala, which is the feeling part. And then you've got the cortex. And if we are trying to speak to their cortex and their lids are kind of flipped, and they don't really have access, which that happens. There's a neurological disconnect when they're really upset, then it's not going to work. So that's one thing to keep in mind, or I should say 2 things. Number 1, when I'm doing something, connecting and then correcting, am I correcting from a position of mutual respect, which is the ladder on the side, horizontal relationships? Secondly, am I connecting with the part of their brain that needs the connection? In other words, am I helping them find that place of calm? Am I helping them feel understood? And then am I ready to problem solve, or am I hurrying that process too much? The other thing is, am I appealing to this part of the brain? Now look at that toddler. How many of you think that a parent or caregiver instructed that child to go over and help that little bunny rabbit? No way, right? The toddler was like, oh, I need to do it. I can help, right? And that is how we are wired as humans. We're social beings, right? So we came out of the womb ready to be part of the pack. And part of that is a hard wiring that fires up when we're kind of in flow. Like when we talk about this idea of flow, like when we are kind of being a team, being a community, and finding not our personal flow, but that community flow in a classroom. We've all had that. When we're in that place of flow, it feels good to be in cooperation and in collaboration, in community. It feels good to help each other out, right? So one thing that we can be bringing more into the classroom is the spirit behind this picture. So we go from here, that happens naturally, to then an adolescent that, their locker's a disaster. It's spilling out on the floor. It's affecting other people, and getting them to see, beyond the end of their nose can be challenging. So what we want to do is fire up our social impact language. So Dr. Adler coined the term Gemeinschaftsgefühl. I'm not German, so if I butchered the word, I'm sorry. Gemeinschaftsgefühl. And all that really means is community feeling. It's the idea of social interest. So we want to capture the spirit of the toddler right there and keep it going. So are we using language that is kind of the language of social impact? So I think sometimes, for example, a child does something and we say, thank you. Okay, that's lovely, but let's add on. Thank you. The group really benefited from that, right? Or instead of saying, oh, sorry, we're not going to be able to do that. It's like, oh, I don't know if that would meet the needs of the group. When something's going well, I think the community really appreciated whatever it is. So bring in teamwork language whenever you can. When someone has done something that has social impact, bring that in beyond just a thank you, even beyond just a thank you, the group benefit. It's like, say, how would they benefited? When we're giving encouragement, we talk about being specific. Well, when there's social impact, draw that out. That's part of being the talent scout. Things like, you know what, when you helped him pick up the stamp game when it fell on the ground, did you notice a smile on his face when you ran over to help? I think he looked so relieved. That's what I mean. Like, bring to consciousness what they may or may not be picking up on that. And one of the reasons why that's great is because if you have a child, let's say, struggles being generous, struggles being patient, maybe they struggle being empathetic. When you are the talent scout and you find the moment in which they are being patient, empathetic, kind, then draw forth the social impact. Because if you just said to the child, "You're so kind," they're like, "No, I'm not." And both of us know it. You know, like, we don't come across genuine, authentic. But if a child is doing something that has a social impact and you say the impact with evidence, like, did you see the look up on his face? He looked so relieved when you helped him. You know, he missed yesterday's lesson. And when you caught him up, oh, I think he was so relieved to know he can turn to you for help, right? Or when you share, or when you gave that work to your friend, did you see their smile? Okay, so just social impact things. Then you can attach the kind word or the empathetic word or the patient word. Say, you know what? There's a word for that. We call that kindness. Thanks for bringing kindness today. And they can't really refute that because you gave evidence. You gave the social impact. So that's a talent scout moment right there that starts to shift the belief. Because what you're doing is you're giving them new data that they wouldn't have otherwise collected. Remember the little wheel? They're collecting data. We tend to only collect the data that supports our system, our belief system. You got to give them new data. Because if you think about the belief system, let me bring that up again. Here's the belief system. We can't really decide how they'll interpret something, nor what their belief is, nor what their behavior is. All we can really do is have some, not even control, but influence over what they'll observe, meaning the environment and what we do in the environment, what they're going to observe hearing from us. That's where new data comes, is right here. Okay. The image, so the images I'm giving you are the iceberg. So when you're in a struggle with a child, you're like, "Ooh, where am I? Am I trying to just be a behavior modifier? Am I working on being a belief modifier? Am I taking into account the idea that, am I correcting this child and they're not even regulated? That's not going to work. Am I accounting for, am I helping this child see where their behavior impacts the community? And I wouldn't highlight like how it impacts negatively. Am I drawing forth enough? This is part of that significance piece, where their impact is positive. And then you've got the latter image. So one of the things that we do when we are in these tough moments is we do something that I'm really good at. We do this. Last word. We do a lot of that, right? Aren't we good at that as adult guides and teachers? Oh yeah, we go into this profession because we probably like to hear ourselves, probably a little too much. Okay. One of the best tools that we can do for children is to learn to say less. We know this is Montessorians. This is not profound information. But when we are correcting, we want to do, it's like we want to help ourselves become perhaps the control of error with the fewest amount of intervention or words or energy behind that. Okay, so like when a child is struggling with a stamp game problem, there's a control of error in there around the colors and the columns and all of that. And if they need help, we might just maybe point and do something really small, like, what would happen if you tried starting from the other side of the column, or maybe we just point to the column, right? And we don't come up and go, we went through this yesterday. How is it that you're not remembering this? We don't attach the little shame and guilt that often gets attached with our body language or our words when we're correcting a problem they're making, that's social problem versus a math problem, or they've got their movable alphabet backwards or something. So how can we be the control of error in the same way that the work is? Like, how can we be inherently corrective for them without the shame, without the guilt, and without making a big to-do? So Robin, you didn't know this, but I'm just going to take my clothes off in this class tonight. Here I go, because we have a superpower. And I had to wear my shirt to show my superpower. This is why Robin's my friend. I do really weird things, but this is my superpower right here. PWS. Maybe I need to make it as a cape to be like more appropriate here, but PWS. We've got to, in the same way that we embrace like giving lessons with less words, we've got to embrace correcting children's behavior with, this is P, being more present, bringing a lot of warmth. And then this is the hardest one, silence. Probably our best way to be a control, kind of sort of the control, right, is the silence part. Like, we're pretty good at being present and warm. We're not so good at being silent. And we know that children learn experientially, they learn sensorially. And so when our mouth is opening and going, they're not learning. It's not when they're going to learn, right? And they're not going to develop consequential thinking if they're not seeing a sequence, because the moment our voice gets in there and starts trying to see, this is why we put coats on, and this is why we pack our lunches and all the stuff, like the little mini I told you so's, even if they're delivered in a kind way. I'm just so hot, I'm gonna take the shirt off completely and I'm just gonna wear my t-shirt, if that's all right. So plus it's PWS, baby, like, why not? Let's bring it. So I want to go through a couple tools, and I want us to see where the PWS shows up. Okay. So tool number one, and let's just pause before I do that. Questions, comments.
So we have a couple comments and a couple questions, and Anel, I don't know if you left. She had a question, but we may get to that. And I also just want to give you a time update. It's 7:57. So
Okay.
just a time update.
All right.
And I also do want to share, and I haven't asked Jody about this, but as she mentioned, we're friends, that for those of you who have questions or want to get in contact with Jody, I'll make sure that you have access to her to follow up. So if you don't get your question answered today and you want to discuss whatever with Jody's permission, I will share that.
Yeah, there's my email in the chat, and there's my website right coming at you here in a minute, and you can join my mailing list. I don't send things out very often, but when I have new classes, I send things out. I don't really market myself much because I'm mostly word of mouth, but that's how you can be in touch with me. Okay.
And another just quick little plug to that. Jody has done courses for the Montessori Foundation. Mm-hmm. And so I expect that there'll be more of those in the future. So if you're not, please just keep, if you're interested, try to, connect with Sarasota University, the Montessori Foundation, and we can keep an eye out for what she's talking about, like longer courses that are specifically catered towards one demographic. So anyway, Jody, go ahead with your tools. Yeah.
And I generally keep my clothes on, but you got to pay extra if I take more things off in those longer courses. Got to bring the humor, everybody.
Can't take her anywhere.
Can't take me anywhere. Okay. So I only because there's some toddler folks, not toddlers, toddler folks. Super quick tool. We probably are all doing this somewhat anyway, but I want you to be a toddler class for me, or just young children. And I'm just going to do a few of these, and I'm just going to throw a couple statements out at you as a guide or teacher in the class, or maybe connected. I'm also their parent, so after school and before, all that. So don't forget your coat, everybody. Okay, put your work away. Hurry up and get your things so that we don't have to wait on you. The class is ready to go outside. This is not something to argue about. We don't hit in our classroom. Use your walking feet. Please sit at circle respectfully. You need to say you're sorry. Okay. I delivered those in a semi-nice tone, but as my toddlers, will you open up the chat? Just one word. How do those statements leave you feeling?
Ashamed.
Shame? Negative?
Disrespected.
Small, controlled? Disrespected, I heard. It's like I'm your GPS. How many of you use your GPS on your phone so much now that you have to go somewhere, unless you have that thing open, you almost forget where you're going? Anybody feel like that sometimes? Yeah. I actually grew up as an adult for many years without a phone. I had to use a map, like a paper map, to look at where I was going. And you learn to memorize it. So if we're trying to be GPSs to kids and just telling them what to do, they're not doing any thinking. So the tool that we can use here instead might sound a little bit like this. What do you need so you won't be cold outside? Where can you put this work so the next person can find it? What can you and your friend do to solve this problem? What would help you sit at circle quietly and calmly today? How can you fix your mistake with your friend? So there's a few. Give me one word. How did those leave you feeling? Okay. So the switch up I did was I went from telling, micromanaging, being your GPS. I just went from telling to asking. Now remember, children being told about 400 times a day, they're actually doing it about 60% of the time, which I think is pretty good batting average if you ask me. So this is just shifting a little more thought to you. Now this tool is going to be best if we ask and then we PWS it. Like we just ask it. We don't even really need the answer. We're looking for an answer of action. But often what we do is we ask it, what do you need to put on your feet to be cold outside? And then we keep going. Look out the window. I see some snow. Remember yesterday when you were cold? So just fewer words and then PWS it. And for those of you that are like, oh, but I try that, but then they still kind of dig in their heels, PWS even more. Just stay present, stay warm, have that nice little smile. It's not the evil eye, just that smile, and just stay silent. Okay. That's one quick tool. I'm going to bring up a slide here that shows a couple more. So ask versus tell. I kind of skipped over number one, but often a lot of redirection can occur with a lot fewer words than even an ask. It could be something like just a point and then PWS, or it might be a just an I notice the work is still on the table, and then not, What did we talk about this? We've been through this. We had a class meeting about it. What did the class decide? Do you remember your friend's gonna need this work and they need this space and again, all these words. So just ideally a point or a nonverbal of some kind. Next might be 1 or 2 words. Last might be an I notice. It's without judgment. Just, I notice the class is ready to go inside. It's waiting for everybody to be ready, and then PWS. They are expecting you to talk because that's what adults do. So their behavior is very reflective of what they think you're about to say or do. So by not doing that, kind of, I don't like using the word hijack because that's almost like a violent word, but it disrupts, that's the word. It disrupts a cycle that kids can get in. They're waiting for the little reprimand or they're waiting for the little scold. Okay. And the last tool there that I was going to share, it's certainly not the only, but the last is this idea of being more curious. Okay. So, and I see that somebody had to leave. I'll wrap this up here in just a minute. I have my little curio cabinets. Okay. Now, some of us know the term curio because that's an older term. A curio cabinet has, maybe your grandparent had a curio cabinet with little curios inside. So if we're not sure of what the word curio means, it's just the fragile things that go in and often a kind of a fragile glass cabinet. Okay. Getting curious with children is like opening this cabinet. And it's interesting that the word curiosity has the same root word. So I'm a Montessori teacher. I love etymology. Curiosity, coming from the same place, around this idea of a kind of the general sense is it needs care and it's fragile. It's handled with care moments. So when I open this cupboard, because I've got fragile little things in there, I have to be very careful, how I open the cupboard and how I draw forth something from the cupboard, the cabinet. And likewise, kind of how I put it back and close it up for next time. That's how we have conversations with children where we're bringing just curiosity. If I just want them to do something, go to an ask versus a tell. Like, don't beat around the bush. Like, just go to the ask versus tell. That's using a questioning strategy that's meant to be motivational. This is using a questioning strategy that's meant to be conversational. And they're doing more of the conversing than you are, right? So the way you open it up is often I notice getting work done doesn't seem to be your thing this week, right? No judgment. I notice packing away is kind of tough for you. I notice recess is important to you. Like, just little, I notice maybe telling the truth does not feel emotionally safe for you right now. Not, I notice you lied. So like, how do we open this cupboard with an I notice? And then we follow it up with what and how questions. I gave a couple examples here. What and how, we never do why, because why corners kids. Why? Because they're looking for belonging and significance. And what they're doing is a solution to the problem we don't see. There's the why. So let's ignore the why question. Stick to, what's your plan for this? I can see you don't want to come in from recess. How do you see this impacting the group? What could you do to see that everyone's needs are met? You're making good points for this not working for you. How can this work for everybody? So again, this is that social impact language. So what and how questions are what you would use when you want to be curious and you're not trying to motivate your child to do something here. No, this is to understand. That's all it is. It's just to understand. And you'll glean some information that you wouldn't have otherwise gleaned if you're approaching it like you're opening that careful cupboard, but you're also not approaching it from up here. Like, this one really takes a lot of nuance. For young toddlers, those are pretty wordy. It might be something more like, were you trying to do this or this, or giving them basically a choice of curiosity in a sense. What is it you were trying to accomplish? Was it this or was it this? Do you think if we do that, this might happen or that might happen? That might be a way to be curious with a toddler. So those are a few tools that all are dependent on those images I gave you: the ladder, the regulation, the Gemeinschaftsgefühl, the iceberg. And if we're taking all those into account, it's going to take you a couple seconds to gather your thoughts around that, which is going to force it into PWS, just while you figure out what in the world I'm supposed to do, right? Which is, it's like buying you a vowel. This is a good thing. Those vowels really help. Time helps. If the house isn't burning, doing nothing is an okay thing to do, right? Use that moment to observe them, to observe you. Am I regulated? Am I ready to be in relationship? Do I have access to my reasoning mind? So taking these images and pausing before reacting will allow you to respond. And responding comes more from logic. Reacting comes more from feeling. So you're going to be able to respond with more access to the cortex, right? So all these tools in conjunction with PWS, pretty powerful. So that's all I had for you tonight. I welcome questions, comments, or do we need to circle back to any questions that were brought up?
I was just talking to myself and forgot I was muted. Jody, well, first of all, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure you're seeing the comments coming in, but one comment that I just wanted to respond to is when the recording will be available. And so we will, if you got this, I'm not sure exactly how you got access to this link, but we'll be sharing the recording to somebody who shared the link, so you will have access to it. Also, I'd strongly encourage you to reach out to Jody if you have questions and wanted to hear more. And again, cater it towards your school before we, So with those things, I want to answer that question, then allow you all to ask questions, and I'll do my best to moderate. And you can raise hands, comments, questions. You can do it any way you want. We're Montessorians. Ola, I will share it with you. I'm not sure again how you got it, but I'll share it.
Yeah.
Kathy, looks like you have a hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to tell a story. So this week, I was substituting for lunches at in a 3 to 6 class. It wasn't a class where I knew the children well. I'm kind of a friend of the school, and I was just helping out. And there was a little girl, Lucy, and there was an assistant who was in the class, but she doesn't usually do lunches either. So the assistant opens up Lucy's bento box, and the yogurt was on the top of the bento box as well as in the little section. So the assistant wipes off from the top of the bento box into the section, and Lucy flips, and she just turns into a basket case, and she is sobbing hysterically. And she won't talk, she won't say anything, she won't do anything, she won't do anything except be hysterical. So that goes on for a seemingly long time now. I've been in this school a lot of times, and I know that Lucy does this relatively often, and this is just the way she is. And what she needed was time to get herself together. Mm-hmm. So there's a little boy in the other class, and he comes around and he's looking at her and he says, "I think I know what to do." I said, What do you think we should do? He said, "I think you should offer her a hug." So I said, so I couldn't like disrespect him. So I said, okay. So I go over and I said, Ario thinks that I should offer you a hug. Would that be helpful? And she puts her head in her lap deeper and she screams louder. I said, I guess that wasn't a good idea. I said, let me know when you're ready to talk to me. And she cried for, 20 solid minutes. And then she pulled herself together and was ready to talk about how nobody should ever touch the top of her lunchbox to put her yogurt into her, and I said, next time you might want to say those words before anybody does that for you. Oh, the other part is she has a broken arm, and that's why somebody was helping her in the first place. Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
it was just a great story to illustrate everything you said.
Well, it's a great story. And the reality is, okay, let's say you had offered the hug and it worked.
Yeah, wouldn't that have been nice?
Right. The reality is we say connection before correction, and all that really
Yeah.
means is like regulation. Here's
Yeah.
the amygdala and here's the cortex, right?
Yeah.
So if we can kind of speak to the amygdala, the feeling center, then it sort of settles everything down. So while we say connection before correction, sometimes if we connect well, there is no correction. Like we're
think
good,
it would have
right?
worked. I think
Yeah.
that was absolutely the right thing
Yeah.
in a few minutes.
Yeah. Right.
But
Exactly.
this little boy from the other class just wanted the problem solved now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let me offer one more piece that for all of you to try. We're pretty good at asking children, do you need a hug? Well, when you're kind of in a flipped lid and you don't have access to the cortex, what's usually their answer? No, right? Like, no, I don't want a hug, right? And it might come out passively or actively. And Kathy, there's nothing, I'm giving an additional tip, not that you did was lovely.
Well, I know.
Right?
I only did it because he suggested
He
it.
suggested,
And
right.
I was honoring him. And of course, I don't know any of these children very well.
Right. But what we can do instead of saying, do you need a hug, which is a closed-ended question, they can say yes or no, is actually say, and this kind of disrupts the cycle because they're expecting adults to say, do you need a hug? And what we say instead is, Kathy, I could really use it. Or in this case, Lucy. And like, that's not what Lucy's expecting. And if Lucy gives the hug, you take the hug. If Lucy doesn't give the hug, you go, it's okay if you're not ready. I just really could use that hug. Come and find me later when you're ready. Now, what that did is it turned it into a social impact. Like I could use the hug, right? I'm asking you to do something for me.
Yeah.
And it's just a kind of flips it upside down.
Yeah.
In a way that I'm all about consent. So I'm not going to force him to hug me by any means,
Of course
but
not.
that's an option. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw two other hands. It was Alanea maybe, and then someone's hand went up and then came back down.
Yeah, I saw that, and then I'm trying to find it again because of course everything changes on Zoom. Let's see. Well, if you had your hand up, Ellen, did you have your hand up for a second? Ellen, why don't you go, and then I'll continue trying to.
I have had a child for a year. It's going on a year come March, and he's been one hard to read because he's nonverbal. And he's hard to connect with because of all the other things that we're struggling with. And it's progressively like a snowball, it's getting worse. And I don't know what to do with him. And I've tried connecting with him. I've tried to hug him. I've sat there and comfort him. And I just don't know what else to do because he's
I have something to show you, but it's just out of reach. So hang tight.
Okay.
It's a non-verbal way to maybe provide a little support. This is great for nonverbal kids or kids. Let's face it, when we're here, like we've kind of flipped our lids. That's a Dan Siegel thing. When we've kind of flipped our lids, then not very many of us are verbal. In fact, the last thing that we really want to do is invite a child to be verbal because what's going to come out is probably not going to be very helpful, right? So assuming the child is nonverbal, either developmentally, physically, or just emotionally in that state. And this probably younger child, so I'm not sure if this is entirely elementary level, but I don't know, you never know. But I just have a picture here of, I'll spotlight myself, these are laminated, so they're a little bit glare. But here's just some pictures, like just variety, showing a variety of feelings. And you can come up to a child and just point. Are you feeling a little bit like this? And they really feel felt if you kind of get it right. Or, you could just hold it out and say, which of these kind of show how you're feeling? Once you've used it once with the child, you probably don't have to say anything the next time. And then you can just flip it over. And these are options. What would help you right now? Now, your options are going to be different in your classroom, depending on your age level and, what is an option to them. But, we've got like doing a little yoga or some reading. Would this help? Hold my hand. A hug, a teddy bear, water. This is like a little breathing ball that opens and closes. Maybe meditate, look out by the window. So this is a nonverbal way to kind of connect with a child without having to kind of get into all this talking. The other thing you might try is this one. You could just make one, right? Pretty easily. But I don't know if I'd use the word anger, maybe you're feeling, how you look like you're having some big feelings. Do you want to show me how big your feeling is right now? Again, I'm just trying to empathize. I'm not trying to fix it for them. Somebody's mentioning a wheel of choice. That's another one, like a wheel of choice. What would help you right now? There's a couple different wheel of choices. I don't love cartoon emojis, but you could do this with faces. But instead of asking a child how they feel, you could ask, how do you want to feel? And then this one, I have like a little frame. So they put the frame around, I would feel confident today. And so then I take it a step further with, well, what are you going to do to be confident? A little growth mindset in terms of like a little personal responsibility. What are you going to do to feel confident? Is there anything I can do to help? Is there a student in the classroom that you want to, kind of phone a friend to help you today? So those are a few things. Connecting with him preventatively. This is like in the morning. How do you want to feel today during work time? The wheel of choice. And how big are your feelings? Again, this doesn't take a lot of talking or using images. I don't know if that would help you. I see the comment about students making their own wheel of choice. That's commonly done. The other thing you can do is make a class wheel of choice. Maybe if you have a class of 24 kids, maybe make several wheels of choice, cut them up. Everybody gets a slice. And on their slice, they draw a picture, magazine, collage, take photos, whatever you're going to do to show a regulation strategy. And then now you're going to end up with like 24 slices or 18 slices. And that can go over in your little piece corner. And then when a child's struggling, you could say, do you think building a wheel of choice would help you right now? And they can go through and sort through the different slices and select 6 that they like, sort of in a sense, build their wheel of choice and then pick one. And that whole process of sorting through, building it, just kind of is diffusing, the feelings. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
I want to say a couple things real quick. If we're sort of winding down, is again, I want to first and foremost thank, I'll thank you all for joining us today. So I appreciate you all joining. Again, I recognize on a Wednesday afternoon / evening, depending where you are, Dr. Lorenz, it's a little earlier for you than some of us, but it's good to see you, Norman. But also mostly want to thank Jody for joining us today. Again, I mentioned Jody's been a longtime friend of mine and a colleague in the Montessori world and doing incredible work with Montessori and also positive discipline. And so I shared this earlier, but those of you who didn't, she's done work with me at some of my schools. And I really strongly encourage you to reach out to her if you want to learn more about positive discipline, if you want to learn about work she can do with your parents. Actually, I think, Jody, when you came, did you do parents and teachers? I can't remember.
I don't remember. I do all kinds of things.
But a lot of really good stuff. I see one more hand. So she put her contact in there. So I want to put that there real quick before we leave. I just wanted to share a couple things about Sarasota University since some of you may be new to it. So we're a very small strength-based university, but right now we have 2 master's degree programs in Montessori. We're hoping to do a bachelor's completion and a doctoral program. So if you haven't learned about Sarasota University, please just check it out. So that way you can hear more about the colloquia and don't have to hear about it from your friends, cousins, mothers, sisters, but you can actually get on our mailing list. So that way, when we have other stuff like this comes up, that you can get it, share it with your communities. So I wanted to share those two bits. Yes, Bethany, Sarasota, Florida, there's a small university where it's a strength-based university, but really it's a Montessori university. And so, and we're actually going through some pretty exciting stuff, but that's a whole nother conversation that maybe our next colloquium. But Jody, before we end it for the night, and again, if you have to leave, please do. I see one hand up. I don't know how that works. It's like,
It's
see it.
more Dr. Lorenz.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon and good evening to all of you. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I work with Dr. Robin Howe at Sarasota University, and it's all over the world. It's an internationally recognized university. I'm actually teaching in the master's program out of California. I reside at Sacramento City College after being a longtime Montessorian. And Jody, I want to thank you for your delivery today. Is the work that you've done, because I came in after a charter school finance meeting for a Montessori high school, so I apologize for coming in late, but is the work on positive discipline based in the roots of Jane Nelson's positive discipline work?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we did a whole spiel there about that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is this book
Yes.
Was just came out August of 2021, last year. So this is now Positive Discipline for the Montessori Classroom, written by Jane and Chip.
Yes.
And so this was a game changer to take positive discipline and kind of speak our language.
So about 35 years ago, I took my very first ownership of school. I started in the summer, and I took over a school of license for 36 preschoolers, and I took them to the local library. And while they were looking for the children's books, I happened to be kind of looking through, it was 1987, and I was looking through the stacks, and I came upon this book by Jane Nelson called Positive Discipline. And, you know, Kathy, your story about the broken armed child, she wasn't broken. She was broken in other ways for a few minutes, right? And that's what Jane Nelson's theories have become practices. We quickly instituted that into our Montessori teacher education. And it, no matter any class that I teach here on campus or in the master's program, I always reference Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson. I had the very fortunate opportunity to meet her as a first-year psychologist and counselor here in Sacramento, California. She resided in Fair Oaks, California initially, and I'm not sure where she resides. I think she's in Colorado now, but at any rate,
San Diego now.
San
Not too
Diego.
far.
Okay. But what I would ask all of you, if you've not read her book, and particularly the book that has just come out, it is a game changer with the construct that, you know, when we look through the lens of being present, being warm, and being silent in the beautiful lessons of Montessori materials, positive discipline becomes an intrinsic motivation in what we teach about obedience and the concepts that connect to the principles of Montessori. And it so nicely married for me in those early years. And I simply still use those conditions today, not only in the community college classes that I teach, but also in the master's program. And so one more little push on Sarasota. You heard Robin talk about the fact that Sarasota is a strength-based Montessori leadership university. And that is the building of Gallup's strengths with our Montessori tenets. And it really is a beautiful thing. I am actually finishing a 8-term class with about 8 colleagues around the world in school law. And they've all done presentations and published them on YouTube about the fact that one person said to me, and that's the beauty of sharing it with all of you, is that we don't oftentimes know about school law, right? School law is something that happens at the office, and I just do my job. And then all of a sudden we find out in our job, we maybe haven't been positive in our discipline, and now we're being called on the carpet for it. And then the school is potentially sued because of it. And so the warmth and the friendliness that these 8 master's students have incorporated Montessori leadership with law is that it diminishes the amount of it increases the amount of empathy and prolific community that we build, that maybe someday Montessori schools will be recognized for not having those kinds of issues, and that will be a better methodology and a way to go. So thank you, Jody, for offering that today. I caught the last 45 minutes and it was beautiful. It really made my day.
Thank you. I saw Candace raise her hand. Was it still Candace? Maybe not. Okay. Candace might have had to leave. All right. Well, I will piggyback what was just spoken, and that is positive discipline principles are not how we treat children, it's how we treat people. And after taking so many people taking classes, parenting classes and teachers taking classes, they just kept saying, we kept hearing again and again and again, well, I need this for my employees, or I need to use this at work with colleagues. And, so we actually do have a positive discipline class for adults. We just don't call it that because it comes across sounding a little condescending, but it's called Empowering People in the Workplace. So I did a 6-hour series for the foundation, Montessori Foundation, last spring. Well-received content. It was like, how are we going to bring empowerment to our employees, our teachers? It might even be, gosh, maybe we need a positive discipline for our parents. Like, how are we going to treat our parents and build the community with the adult community as well? So these are universal principles applied in the classroom, in the home, in the workplace, in our relationships with our significant others. So they all exist for that reason.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, now we are upon an hour and a half. So in closing, Jody, love you. It was awesome seeing you again. And
Love
for those
you
of
back,
you, Norman, you missed this part, but both of us studied under Dr. Michael Dorr at the same time. And so we have a long history. So I want to thank you, Jody. And I also want to say one last thing. For any of you who happen to be at a Montessori conference, whether it's, the Montessori Foundation conference coming up or at AMS, and you see us out there, I would just speak for myself, but please reach out and say, hey, saw you there, because it's really nice to see people, especially as there's so many people that we don't know. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And again, the recording will be made public. So we look forward to seeing you. All of Jody's information is there. When we share the recording, we'll make sure you have access to Jody as well. So thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you, Kathy, for your story as well.
Okay.
Thank you. This was excellent.
Appreciate that. Have a good rest of your week, everybody.
Absolutely.